Welcome back to the Wilderness Protocol. The cardinal is banging on the chapel door again. I stand at attention, halberd in hand, watching Cardinal Toretti pound his fists against the black oak like he's trying to wake the dead. His red robes are disheveled, his face flushed with anger or desperation. Maybe both. "Open this door immediately," he shouts. "I am a prince of the church. I demand entry. I don't move. I don't speak. These are the rules." Cardinal Toretti spins around to face me. "Sergeant Moretti, I am giving you a direct order. Stand aside. I've been guarding the Black Chapel for 6 years. In that time, 3 popes have died. 4 cardinals have tried to force their way inside. And 1 Swiss guard has been executed for breaking the rules. I know what happens when you disobey. I cannot do that. Your Eminence. Cannot or will not. Both." The cardinal's face turns purple. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, Your Eminence." "Do you know my authority within these walls?" "Yes, Your Eminence." "Then why are you defying me?" I shift my grip on the halberd. The weight is comforting. Familiar. Because the rules are clear. "Your Eminence, no one enters the Black Chapel. Ever." Cardinal Toretti takes a step closer. He's a big man, thick around the middle, with hands that could probably snap my neck if he tried. But he won't try. Not here. Not in front of the chapel. "My nephew is dying," he says, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The doctors say he has hours left. He's 8 years old." I say nothing. They say there are miracles behind that door. Relics that could save him. I say nothing. "Please." The word hangs in the air between us. Cardinals don't say please to Swiss guards. We're servants. Ceremonial figures in funny uniforms. But not here. Not at the Black Chapel. "I'm sorry for your loss, Your Eminence." "He's not dead yet." "He will be." Cardinal Toretti stares at me for a long moment. Then he turns and walks away, his footsteps echoing down the stone corridor. I listen until the sound fades completely. I've been standing in this spot for 14 hours straight. My legs ache and my back is stiff. But I don't move. Movement draws attention. Attention leads to questions. Questions lead to broken rules. The Black Chapel sits in the deepest part of the Vatican, 3 levels below the Sistine Chapel. Accessible only through a single corridor that hasn't appeared on any official map since 1823. The door is 10 feet tall and carved from black oak that's supposedly older than Christianity itself. There are no windows, no other entrances, no way to see inside without opening the door, which we never do. The rules are simple. Rule 1, no one enters the Black Chapel. Rule 2, guards cannot look inside the chapel under any circumstances. Rule 3, guards cannot speak about what they hear from inside the chapel. Rule 4, guards who break any rule are executed immediately. Rule 5, there are no exceptions. I learned these rules 6 years ago from my predecessor, a man named Santos, who'd been guarding the chapel for 23 years. He taught me the routine, the protocols, the history. What he didn't teach me was how to sleep standing up or how to ignore the sounds that come from inside the chapel at night. Because there are always sounds. Right now, it's quiet. Just the distant hum of the Vatican's ventilation system and the occasional footstep from the levels above. But in 3 hours, when the sun sets, the chapel will start making noise. It always does. I check my watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. Santos used to say the chapel was like a wild animal, docile during the day, restless at night. He was right about most things. The corridor is empty except for me and the chapel door. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting everything in harsh white light. The walls are stone, thick enough to muffle sound. but not thick enough to stop it completely. I've stood here long enough to know the difference between someone walking on the level above and someone walking inside the chapel. They don't walk the same way. My radio crackles. Sergeant Moretti. This is command. Status report. I press the button. All quiet. Command. Copy that. Relief is scheduled for 0800 hours. Understood. 16 more hours. I can handle 16 more hours. The radio goes silent. I clip it back to my belt and adjust my grip on the halberd. The weapon is mostly ceremonial. A holdover from the Renaissance when Swiss guards actually fought battles. But the blade is sharp. And the balance is perfect. If someone tries to force their way past me, they'll discover it's more than decoration. A door opens somewhere behind me. Footsteps approach down the corridor. I don't turn around. It's one of the rules that isn't written down but that everyone understands. You don't take your eyes off the chapel door unless you're being relieved. Sergeant Moretti. I recognize the voice. Father Benedetti. One of the archivists from the Vatican secret archives. He's been down here before, asking questions about the chapel's history. I never answer them. Father. I brought you coffee. He steps into my peripheral vision, holding a steaming cup. Father Benedetti is young for a priest, maybe 35, with the pale complexion of someone who spends too much time reading old books in dim rooms. Thank you. I take the coffee without looking away from the door. It's good coffee, which means Father Benedetti probably made it himself instead of getting it from the cafeteria. The Vatican cafeteria makes coffee that tastes like burned water. Long shift. Father Benedetti asks. They're all long. I've been researching the chapel's history. Did you know it was built in 1347? I sip the coffee. It's exactly the right temperature. I found records of the construction crew. Father Benedetti continues. 47 men worked on it. None of them are buried in any cemetery I can find. No death records. No family lineages. It's like they just disappeared. I say nothing. The original blueprints are missing. 2. The only reference I can find describes it as a place for housing that which cannot be contained elsewhere. The coffee is getting cold. I drink more of it. Sergeant, what do you think is inside that chapel? I don't think about it. Come on. You've been standing here for 6 years. You must have some idea. Ideas lead to curiosity. Curiosity leads to broken rules. Father Benedetti is quiet for a moment. Then what happened to your predecessor? Santos. He retired. I can't find any retirement records for him. No pension. No forwarding address. The personnel office says he never existed. I finish the coffee and hand the empty cup back to Father Benedetti. Thank you for the coffee. Father. Sergeant. You should go back to your archives. Father Benedetti takes the cup and looks like he wants to say something else. Instead, he nods and walks away. I listen to his footsteps fade down the corridor. Santos didn't retire. Santos broke Rule 2. It happened on a Tuesday night, 3 months before I took over his post. Santos had been guarding the chapel for 23 years without incident. Then something inside the chapel started calling his name. Not unusual. Things inside the chapel call to people sometimes. Usually, it's just noise, whispers, crying, laughter that doesn't sound quite human. But sometimes it's specific. Sometimes it knows who you are. Santos told me about it later. In the few minutes between when they found him looking inside the chapel and when they executed him. He said the voice sounded like his daughter, who had died in a car accident 15 years earlier. It said her name was Maria and that she missed him and wanted him to come home. Santos knew it wasn't really his daughter. He knew the rules. But after 23 years of standing guard, after hearing his dead daughter's voice every night for a week. He opened the door and looked inside. They found him 3 hours later, standing in the doorway, staring into the chapel with tears streaming down his face. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, and couldn't respond to questions. He just stood there staring until they pulled him away. The execution happened at dawn. A single gunshot to the head in the courtyard behind St. Peter's. No ceremony. No last words. No records. The Vatican has people for that kind of thing. Santos was replaced by me the same day. No training period. No gradual transition, just a new guard with the same old rules. I learned about Santos's death from Commander Reyes, who supervises all the chapel guards. He told me what happened, then gave me Santos's keys and walked away. No additional warnings. No advice about resisting voices, just the keys and the rules. The chapel door is massive up close. Black oak with iron reinforcements. Held shut by a lock that looks like it was made by medieval blacksmiths. The key is old, too. Heavy in my hand. Worn smooth by decades of use. Not that I use it often. Actually, I've never used it. In 6 years of guarding the Black Chapel, I've never opened the door. Not once. The rules are clear about that. No one enters. Which means no one opens the door. Which means the key stays in my pocket unless I'm being relieved. But I've thought about using it. Everyone thinks about it. You can't stand guard at a locked door for years without wondering what's on the other side. The human mind isn't built for that kind of restraint. The trick is to not think about it for too long. My watch says 5:15. The sun is setting above ground, which means the chapel will start making noise soon. Right on schedule. I hear the first sound, whispers. They start soft, like people having a conversation in the next room. Too quiet to make out words. Too distant to identify voices. Just the sound of people talking about something important. I've learned to distinguish between the different types of sounds that come from the chapel. Whispers are the most common, usually starting around sunset and continuing until midnight. Then comes the crying, which lasts until about 3 o'clock in the morning. After that, it's quiet until dawn, when the laughing starts. The laughing is the worst part. The whispers are getting louder now. Still not loud enough to understand, but loud enough to know there are multiple voices, men and women, old and young, all talking at once. Sometimes they argue. Sometimes they sing. Tonight, they just whisper. I adjust my stance and focus on the far end of the corridor. There's a small crack in the wall where water damage has stained the stone. I count the number of stains, 43. I've counted them every night for 6 years. The whispers continue for exactly 47 minutes. Then they stop. The sudden silence is almost worse than the noise. My ears strain to hear something. Anything. But the chapel has gone completely quiet. This is normal. There's always a break between the whispers and the crying. The break lasts for 13 minutes. The crying starts soft like the whispers. Just one voice at first. Someone sobbing quietly inside the chapel. Then more voices join in until it sounds like dozens of people weeping in harmony. I've heard this same pattern hundreds of times. It never changes. Whispers for 47 minutes. Silence for 13 minutes. Crying until 3 o'clock in the morning. Then quiet until dawn, when the laughing starts. The crying is loud enough now that I can distinguish individual voices. A woman mourning something terrible. A child calling for his mother. An old man begging for forgiveness. All of them are crying at once. Their voices blending into a chorus of grief that seems to seep through the door and fill the corridor. I focus on counting the stains on the wall. 43. Always 43. Someone is coming down the corridor. I can hear footsteps. Measured and purposeful. I don't turn around. But I listen. Heavy boots. Confident Stridia security patrol. probably making rounds. The footsteps stopped behind me. Evening, Sergeant. I recognized the voice. Commander Reyes, my supervisor. He's the one who told me about Santos, who gave me the keys, who reviews my reports every week. Commander, how are you holding up? Fine, sir. Commander Reyes steps into my peripheral vision. He's a small man with gray hair and the kind of eyes that have seen too much. He's been with Vatican security for 30 years. But he's never stood guard at the Black Chapel. That's a job for younger men with stronger nerves. Busy night? He asks. Standard pattern, sir. The crying from inside the chapel is getting louder. Commander Reyes doesn't seem to notice, which means he's either deaf or very good at pretending. Any visitors today? Cardinal Toretti. He requested entry. Denied. Yes, sir. Good. Commander Reyes is quiet for a moment, listening to the crying. Father Benedetti was asking questions about you today. Yes, sir. He brought me coffee. What kind of questions? About the chapel's history. About Santos. What did you tell him? Nothing, sir. Commander Reyes nods. Father Benedetti is a good priest, but he's curious. Curiosity is dangerous around the chapel. Yes, sir. Keep an eye on him. If he becomes too interested, let me know. Understood. Commander Reyes turns to leave, then stops. Sergeant. Yes, sir. You've been doing this for 6 years. That's longer than most. Yes, sir. If you ever need to be reassigned, just ask. No questions. No judgment. This job isn't for everyone. I'm fine, sir. I know you are, but the offer stands. Commander Reyes walks away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor until they fade completely. I'm alone again with the chapel and the crying voices inside. The crying continues for another 4 hours. Just like always. Same voices. Same patterns. Same heartbreaking chorus of grief. I count the stains on the wall and think about other things. My apartment in Rome. The pizza place near the Pantheon. The woman I dated before I took this job. Her name was Elena, and she worked at a bookstore. We'd been together for 8 months when I got assigned to the Black Chapel. I tried to explain why I couldn't see her anymore, why my schedule had changed, why I couldn't talk about my work. She thought I was having an affair. She wasn't wrong. Exactly. I am having an affair with this chapel, with these rules, with the sounds that come from behind this door every night. It's the kind of relationship that consumes everything else. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, the crying stops. The silence that follows is complete. No whispers, no sobs, no sound at all. Just me and the chapel door and the weight of the halberd in my hands. This is the quiet time. 3 hours of perfect silence before the laughing starts. Some guards use this time to rest, to let their minds wander, to think about normal things. I use it to prepare for what comes next because the laughing is different from the whispers and crying. The laughing wants something. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the laughing begins. It starts as a single voice, soft and pleasant, like someone just heard a good joke. Then another voice joins in, and another, until the chapel fills with the sound of people having the best time of their lives. This is what makes the laughing different from the whispers and crying. Those sounds feel random, disconnected. The laughing feels directed, like whatever's inside the chapel is laughing at something specific. Like it's laughing at me. I've been standing here for 16 hours. My feet are numb, and my shoulders ache. But I don't move. The laughing gets louder, more animated. Someone inside thinks something is absolutely hilarious. The The sound makes my skin itch. Whispers and crying are sad. But they're human emotions. Everyone whispers. And everyone cries. But this laughing is different. It's too perfect. Too synchronized. Real laughter has breaks, pauses, and moments where people catch their breath. This doesn't stop. My radio crackles. Sergeant Moretti, this is your relief. En route to your position. Copy that. Relief arrives 5 minutes later. Corporal Martinez, a young guard who's been working chapel duty for 8 months. He's good at following rules and doesn't ask questions, the perfect qualifications for this job. Morning, Sergeant. Martinez says. Morning. I hand him the keys and step away from the door. The laughing continues behind us. But Martinez doesn't react. He's learned not to show when the sounds bother him. Anything to report? He asks. Cardinal Toretti requested entry. Request denied. Father Benedetti asking questions about chapel history. Commander Reyes made his evening rounds. Understood. Martinez takes a position in front of the door. Halberd ready. Eyes focus straight ahead. I walk down the corridor toward the exit, listening to the laughing fade behind me. The elevator up to ground level takes 2 minutes of rising through stone and centuries until I reach the normal world, where cardinals don't beg for miracles and priests don't research construction crews that disappeared 700 years ago. My apartment is a 15-minute walk from St. Peter's Square. It's a small place. 1 bedroom. Nothing fancy. I rent it from the Vatican housing office, which means my neighbors are mostly other guards and low-level clergy people who understand that some jobs require you to keep your mouth shut. I shower, make coffee, and sit on my balcony overlooking a narrow Roman street. The city is waking up. Delivery trucks rumbling over cobblestones. Shopkeepers opening their doors. And tourists already wandering around with cameras and guidebooks. Normal people living normal lives. I met Elena at a bookstore on the same street. She was shelving books about art history, and I was buying a novel I'd never read. We started talking about Rome, about how the city changes but never really changes, about how you can walk past buildings that are older than most countries. She asked what I did for work, and I told her I was in security for the Vatican. True enough. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them. We dated for 8 months, had dinner at restaurants near the Pantheon, walked through Villa Borghese on Sunday mornings, and spent lazy afternoons in her apartment reading books and listening to music. It was the closest I've ever come to a normal life. Then I got assigned to the Black Chapel. The assignment came through Commander Reyes on a Tuesday afternoon. He called me into his office and told me Santos was being reassigned and they needed a replacement, someone reliable. Someone who followed orders. And someone who wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. I said yes without asking what I'd be guarding. Commander Reyes handed me a folder with the rules typed on Vatican letterhead. 5 simple rules that would control every aspect of my life for the next however many years. This is a permanent assignment, he said. No rotation. No time limit. You do this job until you can't do it anymore. What happens then? You ask for reassignment. If you're lucky. He didn't mention what happened to guards who weren't lucky. The first time I stood guard at the Black Chapel, I thought the job would be easy. Just stand in a corridor and keep people away from a door. I'd done security work before crowd control and escort duty. How hard could guarding an empty room be? Then the sun set, and the whispers started. I wasn't prepared for the voices. Commander Reyes had explained the rules, but not the psychological pressure of listening to sounds you couldn't identify coming from a place you couldn't see. The first night nearly broke me. The whispers lasted 47 minutes. Just like always. But when you don't know that, when you're hearing them for the first time, 47 minutes feels like hours. I spent the entire time trying to understand what the voices were saying. trying to count how many people were talking, trying to figure out why they sounded familiar. Then came the silence. 13 minutes of complete quiet that somehow felt worse than the noise. Then the crying started. 4 hours of people sobbing inside a locked room while I stood outside listening, men and women and children. All crying about something terrible that had happened or was happening or was going to happen. Their grief felt real, immediate, and personal. By the time the crying stopped at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was ready to quit. I'd never heard sounds like that. Never felt such concentrated despair radiating from one location. I wanted to walk away, to request reassignment, to pretend I'd never taken this job. Then the laughing started. The laughing was what convinced me to stay. Not because it was pleasant, it wasn't, but because it was obviously not human. The whispers and crying could have been recordings, audio tracks played to mess with the guards' heads. But the laughing was something else entirely. It was the sound of things that had once been human but weren't anymore. After my first week on chapel duty, Elena started asking questions. Why was I working nights? Why couldn't I tell her about my assignment? Why did I look so tired all the time? I tried to give her normal answers. Night security shifts, confidential Vatican business, and adjusting to a new schedule. She didn't believe me. You're different, she said one Sunday morning when I'd come home after a particularly difficult shift. You used to talk about everything. Now you barely talk at all. She was right. The chapel changes you. Spending 40 hours a week listening to inhuman sounds coming from behind a locked door does something to your mind. You start to think differently, speak differently, and relate to people differently. You start to understand that the normal world is very small and that there are things outside it that most people never have to think about. It's just work stress. I told her, what kind of security work requires you to sign a confidentiality agreement that you can't even tell me about? The Vatican has secrets. Elena, everyone knows that. I'm not asking for state secrets. I'm asking why my boyfriend has stopped sleeping, stopped eating regular meals, and flinches every time someone laughs. I hadn't realized I'd been flinching at laughter, but she was right. After hearing the sounds from the chapel every night, normal human laughter had started to sound wrong. Too random, too spontaneous, too real. We broke up the following week. Not because of a fight or an argument, but just because I couldn't be the person she'd fallen in love with anymore. The chapel had claimed another piece of my normal life. I finished my coffee and checked the time. 10 o'clock in the morning. I'll sleep until 4 o'clock. Then head back to the Vatican for another 16-hour shift. This is the routine now. Sleep 6 hours. Work 16 hours. Repeat. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just didn't go back. If I stayed in my apartment, turned off my phone, and let someone else stand guard at the chapel door. But that's not how this job works. The Vatican doesn't accept resignations from chapel guards. You work until you're reassigned, which happens when Commander Reyes decides you've reached your limit. Or you work until you break one of the rules, which means you don't work anywhere ever again. My phone rings. It's an unknown number. Hello. Sergeant Moretti. This is Father Benedetti. I checked the time again. Father Benedetti should be in the archives, not making phone calls to off-duty guards. Father, I need to ask you something about the chapel. I can't discuss that. Please, just one question. No questions. My research has uncovered something important, something about why the chapel was built. I hang up. The phone rings again immediately. Same number. I turn the phone off and put it in a drawer. Father Benedetti is becoming a problem. His curiosity about the chapel has moved beyond casual interest into active investigation. That's dangerous for everyone involved. Curious priests have visited the chapel before. Usually, they ask a few questions. get non-answers from the guards, and move on to other research projects. But sometimes they become obsessed. Sometimes they start digging into records that should stay buried. Father Benedetti is showing signs of obsession. I sleep for 5 hours instead of 6. When I wake up, there are 7 missed calls from Father Benedetti and a text message that says, "The construction crew didn't disappear. They were sealed inside." I delete the message without reading it twice. At 4:30, I walk back to the Vatican through crowds of tourists and pilgrims. Street. Peter's Square is packed with people waiting for the evening mass, taking photos, and buying souvenirs from vendors who speak 6 languages and accept every currency. Normal people doing normal things in one of the most sacred places on earth, completely unaware that 3 levels below them is a chapel containing something that requires armed guards and brutal rules to keep contained. I show my credentials at 3 security checkpoints, take 2 elevators, and walk down a corridor that gets progressively older and more isolated until I reach the Black Chapel. Corporal Martinez is still at his post, standing exactly where I left him 8 hours ago. He looks tired but alert. The laughing stopped hours ago, which means the chapel is in its daily quiet period. Anything to report? I ask. Father Benedetti came by twice. Requested to speak with you. Denied. Yes, sir. Also received this. Martinez hands me a folded piece of paper. It's on Vatican letterhead, with a handwritten message, "Sergeant Moretti. Report to my office immediately upon return to duty. Commander Reyes." When did this arrive? 2 hours ago. I look at the chapel door, then at Martinez. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. Standard protocols." Understood. Commander Reyes's office is on the 2nd sublevel, halfway between the normal Vatican and the deep places where they keep things like the Black Chapel. His door is open when I arrive. "Sergeant, come in." Commander Reyes is sitting behind his desk, reading a thick file with my name on the tab. He doesn't look up when I enter. "Father Benedetti has been asking about you," he says. "Yes, sir." He's also been requesting access to sealed archives, records about the chapel's construction, personnel files for previous guards, and incident reports from the 1800s. "Is that a problem, sir?" Commander Reyes closes the file and looks at me. Father Benedetti thinks he's found evidence that the construction crew from 1347 didn't disappear. He thinks they were sealed inside the chapel as part of some kind of ritual. Is he right? That's not your concern. Your concern is standing guard and following the rules. Yes, sir. But it's becoming your concern because Father Benedetti is convinced you know something about the chapel that could help his research. He's filed a formal request to interview you. What did you tell him? I told him chapel guards don't give interviews, but he's persistent, and he has friends in high places. Commander Reyes opens a different file. This one contains photographs, black and white images that look like they were taken decades ago. These are photos of previous chapel guards who were reassigned due to external pressure. He says, priests asking too many questions, cardinals demanding answers, Vatican officials who thought the rules could be bent for special circumstances. The photos show men in Swiss Guard uniforms, but something is wrong with their faces. They all have the same expression, empty eyes, slack mouths, like they're looking at something horrible that only they can see. What happened to them? I ask. They were reassigned to posts where their condition wouldn't attract attention. Night security, archives, maintenance work jobs where they could function without having to interact with people. Their condition. They broke Rule 2. Sergeant. All of them. Commander Reyes puts the photos away. The pressure of external interest makes guards curious. They start wondering what's so important that priests and cardinals want to know about it. They start thinking about looking inside. I'm not curious, sir. Everyone says that right up until they open the door. Commander Reyes stands up and walks to the window. His office overlooks the Vatican gardens, where tourists walk along paths between perfectly maintained flower beds. Father Benedetti is going to keep pushing. He says he's going to ask more questions, make more requests, and try to convince you that helping him is the right thing to do. When that happens, you follow the rules. No exceptions. Yes, sir. And if Father Benedetti becomes too persistent, if he starts interfering with your duties, you let me know immediately. Understood. Commander Reyes turns back to face me. 6 years is a long time to stand guard at the chapel. Sergeant, most guards request reassignment after 2 or 3 years. Why haven't you? I like the work, sir. You like standing in a corridor listening to inhuman sounds for 16 hours straight. I like the clarity, sir. The rules are simple. No ambiguity. No judgment calls. Just follow orders and protect the chapel. And you're not curious about what you're protecting. Curiosity is dangerous, sir. Commander Reyes nods. Good answer. But 6 years of suppressed curiosity has a way of building pressure. If you ever feel that pressure becoming too much, if you ever find yourself thinking about opening that door, you request reassignment immediately. Understood? Yes, sir. Dismissed. I walk back through the corridors and elevators, down into the deep places where fluorescent lights buzz and the air smells like old stone and secrets. Martinez is waiting at his post, alert and professional. How much longer on your shift? I ask. For hours, sir. Any sounds from the chapel? Quiet as a tomb, sir. I take my position in front of the door, and Martinez walks away. 16 hours to go until my next break. 16 hours of standing guard while Father Benedetti researches construction crews and Commander Reyes worries about external pressure. And something inside the chapel waits for the sun to set. In 2 hours, the whispers will start. In 6 hours, the crying will begin. And in 10 hours, whatever's inside will start laughing again. But right now, the chapel is quiet. Just me and the door and the weight of the rules that have kept this place secure for over 600 years. Father Benedetti thinks 47 men were sealed inside the chapel in 1347. If he's right, if those construction workers are still in there after all these centuries, then what I'm guarding isn't just a room full of dangerous relics. I'm guarding a tomb that contains 47 people who died building their own prison. And every night, they tell me exactly how they feel about it. Father Benedetti appears at the end of the corridor at exactly sunset. He's carrying a thick folder and walking with the determined stride of someone who's made an important discovery. I've been standing guard for 3 hours and was expecting the whispers to start any minute. Instead, I'm getting a visit from a priest who thinks he's solved a 700-year-old mystery. Sergeant Moretti. Father Benedetti calls out. I need to speak with you. I'm on duty, Father. This is urgent. It's about the men who built this chapel. The whispers start right on schedule. Soft voices from inside the chapel, beginning their nightly conversation. Father Benedetti stops walking and listens, his face going pale. Do you hear that? He asks. Hear what? Father Benedetti opens his folder and pulls out a document covered in medieval Latin. I found the original construction contract. It specifies that the workers were to be sealed with their creation to ensure eternal service. I don't read Latin, Father. It means they were buried alive inside the chapel. 47 men were killed to keep the chapel's secrets. Father Benedetti takes another step closer. Those are their voices, aren't they? They're still in there. The whispers are getting louder. Multiple conversations are overlapping. Father Benedetti is right about one thing. There are definitely 47 distinct voices. I've had 6 years to count them. Father, you need to leave. I can help them. I can perform last rites and give them a proper burial. They've been trapped for centuries. They're not trapped. They're contained. Father Benedetti stares at me. You know what's in there. I know enough to follow the rules. What if the rules are wrong? What if keeping that door locked is perpetuating a great injustice? Then that's someone else's decision to make. Father Benedetti pulls out another document. This one covered in diagrams and technical drawings. I found the chapel's original blueprints in the Venetian archives. Look at this. He holds up a drawing that shows the chapel's interior layout. It's bigger than I expected, with multiple levels and passages. But what catches my attention are the small chambers built into the walls, 47 of them, each labeled with a name and a death date from 1347. They're buried in the walls. Father Benedetti says, the construction crew was walled up alive to power whatever ritual created this place. Their souls are bound to the chapel. That's not my concern. How can you say that? Those are human souls suffering eternal torment. The whispers suddenly stop. Complete silence from inside the chapel, which never happens during the first phase. Father Benedetti and I both stare at the door. Then a single voice speaks from inside the chapel. Clear and distinct. Let us out. Father Benedetti drops his folder. They can hear us. Father, you need to leave now. They're asking for help. How can I ignore that? The voice from inside the chapel speaks again. Please, we've been waiting. Father Benedetti steps toward the door. I'm going to help them. I move between him and the chapel. No, you're not. Get out of my way, Sergeant. I cannot do that. Father Benedetti reaches into his robes and pulls out a key. Not the chapel key that's in my pocket. This is different. Older. Made of black metal with symbols carved into the shaft. Where did you get that? I ask. The Venetian archives. It's the original master key, created when the chapel was built. Father, do not use that key. Those men have been trapped for 7 centuries. I have the authority and the moral obligation to help them. The voice from inside the chapel speaks again. Hurry, before the others wake up. Others. There are only 47 voices. There have always been only 47 voices. Father Benedetti pushes past me and reaches for the lock. I grab his wrist and twist until he drops the key. It hits the floor with a metallic ring that echoes down the corridor. You're making a mistake. Father Benedetti says. Those souls need help. Those aren't souls. Father. Not anymore. The chapel door shutters. Something inside is pushing against it. Testing the locks. The iron reinforcements creak under the pressure. Let us out. The voice pleads. We know you can hear us. We know you have the key. Father Benedetti breaks free from my grip and lunges for the fallen key. I tackle him, and we hit the floor hard. The folder scatters papers across the corridor. Medieval documents and blueprints spread out like a historical crime scene. You don't understand. Father Benedetti gasps. I've been researching this for months. The chapel was built to contain something that was already here. Something ancient and dangerous. The construction crew wasn't killed to keep secrets. They were sacrificed to create a barrier. The door shutters again. Harder this time. Whatever's inside is getting stronger. Then why are you trying to break that barrier? I ask. Because the barrier is made of human souls in torment. The chapel feeds on their suffering to maintain its power. If we free them, the containment fails. And whatever's inside can be properly exorcised. Or it escapes. That's a risk we have to take. I pin Father Benedetti to the floor and reach for my radio. Command. This is Sergeant Moretti. I need immediate backup at the Black Chapel. Copy that, Sergeant. En route. The voice from inside the chapel changes, becoming deeper, more resonant. The priest understands. You should listen to him. Father Benedetti stops struggling. That's not one of the construction workers. No, it's not. What is it? The reason for the rules. The chapel door stops shuddering. Whatever was testing the locks has gone quiet. But not in a reassuring way. It's the quiet of something that's finished planning and is ready to act. Father, I say, I need you to understand something. The construction crew wasn't sacrificed to create a barrier. They were sacrificed to strengthen a barrier that was already failing. Whatever's inside that chapel has been there since long before 1347. How do you know that? Because I've been listening to it for 6 years. The whispers are the construction workers. They're trying to warn people to stay away. The crying is everyone who's died trying to contain what's inside. And the laughing. What about the laughing? The laughing is the thing they died to contain. And it thinks your plan to free the construction workers is hilarious. Father Benedetti goes pale. If I'm wrong, if opening the chapel releases something worse, then you'll have broken Rule 1, and we'll both be executed for allowing it to happen. Footsteps echo down the corridor. Commander Reyes arrives with 4 armed guards, all carrying weapons I've never seen before, not ceremonial halberds or standard sidearms, but some kind of specialized equipment designed for situations that don't appear in any manual. Situation report. Commander Reyes says, Father Benedetti attempted to open the chapel using an unauthorized key. No breach occurred. Commander Reyes looks at the scattered papers, the fallen key, and Father Benedetti, still pinned to the floor. Father, you're under arrest for violation of Vatican Security Protocol 7. I was trying to help those souls. Father Benedetti protests. You were trying to release something that's been contained for over 1,000 years. Do you have any idea what that thing has done to previous people who tried to help it? Commander Reyes picks up one of the scattered documents and reads the Latin text. This is a fabrication, Father. A very convincing one, but still fake. The Venetian archives were destroyed in 1797. These documents don't exist. That's impossible. I spent months researching. You spent months being manipulated by the entity inside the chapel. It's telepathic. Father, it can project thoughts and images into the minds of people who spend too much time thinking about it. Everything you found, every document you discovered, every brilliant insight about the chapel's history, it all came from the thing you were trying to release. Father Benedetti stares at the documents scattered around us. But they're so detailed, so historically accurate. Because it's old enough to remember 1347. It was there when the chapel was built. It knows exactly what happened because it was fighting the people who were trying to contain it. Commander Reyes signals to his guards. 2 of them lift Father Benedetti to his feet while the other 2 begin collecting the scattered papers. Father, you're going to be relocated to a monastery in Tibet, where you can spend the rest of your life praying for forgiveness and never thinking about Vatican secrets again. What about the construction workers? If they really are trapped in there? They're not trapped, Father. They're guardians. Volunteers who chose to bind their souls to the chapel to help maintain the containment. They are not suffering. They're serving. The guards escort Father Benedetti down the corridor. He doesn't resist, but he keeps looking back at the chapel door with confusion and regret. Commander Reyes picks up the black metal key. This is interesting. It's a real key, probably medieval, but it's been modified with symbols that don't belong to any Christian tradition. Will it open the chapel? Probably, but not the way Father Benedetti thought. This key would have dissolved the spiritual barriers and released everything inside at once. The construction workers, the centuries of accumulated psychic energy, and the original entity. What is the original entity? Commander Reyes looks at me for a long moment. That's above your security clearance, Sergeant. But I will tell you this, it's the reason the Vatican was built here. Not on top of St. Peter's tomb, but on top of that chapel. The entire Catholic Church exists primarily to fund and maintain the containment of what's inside that room. The corridor is quiet now, except for the buzz of fluorescent lights. The whispers from inside the chapel have resumed their normal pattern. 47 voices having their eternal conversation. Will there be more like Father Benedetti? I ask. Always. The entity is patient and clever. It learns from each attempt and adapts its approach. In 50 years, it might convince a scientist that the chapel contains alien technology. In 100 years, it might tell a politician that opening it would solve world hunger. How long can we keep it contained? As long as people like you are willing to stand guard and follow the rules. No matter how reasonable the arguments become. No matter how noble the intentions. No matter how convincing the evidence. The rules don't change. Commander Reyes heads toward the exit. Then stops. Sergeant. Yes, sir. 6 years is longer than most guards can handle. If you ever want reassignment. I'm fine, sir. You always say that. But I need you to understand that this job will eventually consume everything else in your life. Your relationships. Your interests. Your dreams. Eventually, this chapel will be the only thing you care about. I understand, sir. Do you? Because the guard before Santos lasted 18 years. By the end, he couldn't function anywhere except this corridor. He died at his post, standing exactly where you're standing now. What was his name? Matteo. He's buried in the Catholic cemetery on Via Appia. The grave marker says he died of a heart attack. But that's not the whole truth. What's the whole truth? He died of loneliness. 18 years of standing guard had isolated him from every human connection. He had no friends, no family, no life outside this job. The chapel became his entire world. Commander Reyes walks away, leaving me alone with the chapel and the voices inside. 47 construction workers who chose to bind their souls to this place to help maintain the containment. And one thing that's been trying to escape for over 1,000 years. The whispers continue for exactly 47 minutes. Then comes 13 minutes of silence. Then 4 hours of crying, not suffering, but grief for a world they can never return to. Then 3 hours of perfect quiet while the thing inside waits for dawn. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, the laughing starts, the sound of something ancient and patient and eternally amused by human attempts to understand it. I've been doing this job for 6 years. According to Commander Reyes, I might have 12 more years before it consumes everything else in my life, 12 more years of standing in this corridor, listening to these sounds, and following these rules. But someone has to do it. Someone has to stand between the normal world and the things that want to devour it. Someone has to guard the doors that should never be opened and keep the secrets that should never be shared. The construction workers understood that when they volunteered to become part of the chapel's defenses. They gave up their lives, their deaths, and their eternal rest to help maintain something bigger than themselves. I'm not ready to make that kind of sacrifice yet, but I understand why they did it. And I understand why someday I might make the same choice. The whispers stop. The silence begins. 13 minutes until the crying starts. I adjust my grip on the halberd and focus on the far end of the corridor. 43 stains on the wall. Same as always. Everything is normal. Everything is secure. The Black Chapel is contained. Its secrets protected. Its rules intact. And I'm exactly where I need to be. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Wilderness Protocol. If you made it through this report and wish to be briefed on future incidents, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel.